our April TBR today. In a second, I'm going to move over to the table because it's a better location for filming this. But there's no more bookshelves behind my table now. I moved them. So I wanted you to have all the chaotic color that is my apartment behind me for a minute while I say, this is my April TBR. My name is Jenna. I recently changed my channel's name from Chicky Bean Loves Books, which is a title I loved and still do, but I felt like it didn't necessarily make sense to anyone but me. So, and there's a long story with it, which I have shared on an Instagram post once upon a time. You could go there and find it if you wanted to. It has to do with a couple of people I used to teach and some friends I used to have. So there is meaning behind the name Chicky Bean Loves Books, but I always forget to introduce myself at the beginning of these videos. And so I thought, you know what, maybe I need my name in the title so that if I forget, people can still figure out who I am. So it's Books Love Jenna, as in, you know, those books, they love me. That's the new title of my channel. Same content, same person, new title, no big deal. Let's head over to the table and do a TBR. That's better for a TBR. As you can see, the background's really boring now. But since I've been doing a lot of watercolor painting on the weekends and using my dining room table for that mostly, I've wanted a lot more room. So I wanted to put the extender in the table and make it longer. And that meant that I needed to move some things, and that meant that I needed to rearrange the whole apartment twice. But I think we're settled for the moment. Not quite what I want it to be, but it's working. Let's get into the April TBR. There is not much rhyme or reason behind this one. There's a lot of classics. There are a lot of pre-orders. I had a bunch of April pre-orders, just lots of great things coming out this month. So I don't have some of those books to show you, but of course I'll put a picture up in the corner. And yeah, let's just dive right in. Coffee first. Let's start with Bean's Big Book Bash pick for the month. This is a reread for me, and it's a short month. So, I mean, the month's not short, but it's a short Bean's Big Book Bash month on the rotation. In March, I read Stephen Jarvis's Death and Mr. Pickwick, which is a long one. And so this month we're reading Albert Camus' The Stranger. I have, like I said, read this. This is a book that I read in college because I knew this French guy at this international student cafe that I used to attend, and he was talking about it, and I became curious, so I picked it up and I read it, and I don't think I got much out of it. I don't think I understood it. I'm interested to see, because I have no respect for it whatsoever. I own a copy of it because it is a book that I needed for my master's in English that I recently started and did not finish. I'll finish it someday. I will. Life is just too busy. It's too busy. I needed it for a class when I was doing that full time. I have it, but I didn't actually read it. There are a lot of books that I have. I was doing a distance program and they would send all the books that were on the reading list. And so there's a lot of books that didn't actually apply to me when it came down to it. And I still have them and I want to get through them all. That's how I ended up reading The Lover this year. That's how I'm reading or rereading Albert Camus' The Stranger. It's been around for a long time. People talk about it. There's got to be something to it, right? So I think as an adult and as a person who has studied a lot of literature and traveled a lot now, I think that there might be more in this for me than there was when I was a kid. So we're going to read Albert Camus' The Stranger. I know that it's about a guy. Let's see. It's about a guy in prison or something. I don't remember, and I don't think there is it's translated from the French. Translator's note, which I don't want to read, and then dive straight into it. Yeah, like this is so beloved, or so respected at least, that there's no description. So we're just gonna go with I'm reading The Stranger, and I'll let you know how it goes and what it's about at the end. My classic for the month is my only not ancient classic, or if not ancient, because the others haven't been ancient, my only not super old classic. This is from the Victorian period, and I didn't want to do many from the Victorian period because I knew I'd want to be doing a lot of Victorian reading anyway. And so when I picked my classics, I wanted to pick things that I don't normally gravitate towards. However, I do not normally gravitate towards Victorian novels in verse. This time I'm going to read Elizabeth Barrett Browning's Aurora Leigh. I have only ever read some of Elizabeth Barrett Browning's sonnets to the Portuguese, and I've taught as a sonnet, How Do I Love Thee? Over and over again. I've never read a longer work by her, and I've never read a complete work by her, and I'm really excited about this used copy that I got because it is full of someone else's very careful and thorough annotations, and I just hope that it's going to add an extra level of my reading experience. Aurora Leigh says it's the foremost example of the mid-19th century poem of contemporary life. The social panorama of this verse novel extends from the slums of London to the upper classes and includes a number of superb satiric portraits. And that's all I'm going to read because we all know how these Victorian classics, can ruin everything on the back of a book. So this is my classic for the month, and I think it's going to take me a while to get through, but I'm excited to dive into it. There will, of course, be a book of the month. I have no idea what that book of the month will be. I'm doing a purposeful reread. I want to reread The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie by Muriel Spark. This is one of my favorite books. I read this in, I think, 2012 or 2013 for the first time, and just really fell in love with it. And I have listened to it a second time since that first read, but this will be my first revisit of it physically. I happened to just pick this up for very cheap. I think it was $1.25. And I was like, yes, I am going to reread The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie. So I'm very excited about that. My Sophie Kinsella for the month is 20s Girl. This is a weird one for Sophie Kinsella. This is one where a girl is given or buys or finds a locket, and attached to that locket is the spirit of a woman from 1920s London. And the two do not really get along all that well. So this is a hilarious one. It is very funny. It is very supernatural. Yeah, I haven't read it. I've only read it once. And it was during a move, and I was listening to it only. I've never actually physically read this one. So this should be super fun. I'm very much looking forward to it. I love that yellow for spring, that pink for spring. I think it's going to be an excellent, there's a lot of activity outside. I think it's going to be an excellent read. I have 2 nonfiction that I would like to read this month. One is this beautiful book I picked up for my birthday book haul. This is 100 Saturdays, Stella Levi and the Search for a Lost World by Michael Frank. My understanding of this book is that Michael Frank sought out this woman who he knew had been a member of a group of Jews living, I think, on a Greek island after the war. And he wanted to kind of or maybe she was living on a Greek island before the war and then she evacuated. I think that's what it is. He meets her in New York and she's old, like in her 90s. And he wants to capture, he's an artist. There's lots and lots of beautiful art pieces throughout. He wants to capture in art and story memories of life as a Jewish woman or child in this culture that we don't necessarily know much about Judaism through the lens of. So I'm not doing a very good job. Maybe I should just dive into the description. It says, With nearly a century of life behind her, Stella Levi had never before spoken in detail about her past. Then she met Michael Frank. He came to her Greenwich Village apartment one Saturday afternoon to ask her questions about the Juderia, the neighborhood, in Rhodes. Okay, the neighborhood in Rhodes where she'd grown up in a Jewish community that had thrived there for half a millennium. Neither of them could know that this was the first of 100 Saturdays over the course of 6 years that they would spend in each other's company. During these meetings, Stella traveled back in time to conjure what it felt like to come of age on this luminous, legendary island in the eastern Aegean, which the Italians began governing as an official possession in 1923, and transformed over the next 2 decades until the Germans seized control in September 1943. The following July, they rounded up all 1,650 residents of the Juderia and sent them first by boat and then by train to Auschwitz on what was the longest journey, measured by both time and distance, of any of the deportations. 90% of them were murdered upon arrival. Stella was born into the mysterious world of Jewish Rhodes, witnessed its destruction, and lived to tell the tale. Probing and courageous, elegant and sly, she is a modern-day Scheherazade whose stories reveal what it was like to be formed by an extraordinary place in an extraordinary time and to construct a life after that place has vanished. Okay, I get goosebumps every time I read that. I really, really, really am looking forward to this. I think it's just going to be just what I want in April, just what I want. Going along with that nonfiction and kind of family type theme, I do have Finding Family, My Search for Roots and the Secrets in My DNA. I think this is supposed to be like a true crime thriller using DNA evidence that the author finds about his own family that gave him up for adoption. That is my understanding. Let's dive into what it says on the back. So it says, what family secrets would you discover in your DNA? Richard Hill did not plan to be a pioneer. He was just an adoptee trying to identify unknown birth parents. Yet, his innovative application of DNA testing put him on the front page of the Wall Street Journal in May 2009. Richard shares the whole story of his search in this suspenseful memoir, Finding Family, My Search for Roots and the Secrets of My DNA. His relentless quest to find his birth family takes readers on an exhilarating roller coaster ride and concludes with a true twist that rivals anything Hollywood has to offer. Now, thousands of adoptees are following Richard's groundbreaking path using DNA testing to bypass sealed records and reunite with their first families. Countless more adults are discovering new genetic relatives and extending and confirming their family trees. The emerging science of genetic genealogy provides a fascinating window into the past, yet the growing number of tests can be confusing. A beginner's guide to DNA testing included here as a supplement is the concise overview you need, blah, 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 blah. I don't need to do DNA testing, but I think that this sounds fascinating. I'm curious about DNA and how it can be used. I anticipate, if there's a closed file, if there's a closed adoption, there's probably reasons for that. And sometimes those reasons may be good. So I'm curious. I'm curious to know what he does, what he finds out, and what the parameters and the boundaries are that can be established around using this in a responsible way for all parties. I know people want to know who they are, but some people don't want to be found, So I don't know. I don't know what I think. I'm curious. And that is why I want to read the book. I am going to pick up the second book in this series. So I read A Great and Terrible Beauty in February and really, really loved it. That was a reread, but it felt like a first-time read. This will be a first-time read. I never picked up the second book. I don't know what it's about. I haven't read the flap. I just know that in the first book, we met, what is her name? Gemma. We met Gemma Doyle in India, shopping with her mother and being a little bit of a teenage brat when her mother is killed. And she is sent back to a country that she's never really been in before, to England, and put into a boarding school. And there she gets involved in some very weird supernatural things. There's seances and ghosts and spell books and traversing the line between life and death involved, spirits, demons, and hidden agendas, and all sorts of unknown involvements, all sorts of attachments to things that she didn't make, that she doesn't know she has. And so I'm really, really curious to see where the second book takes us. That's a thick book, but it goes very quickly. I have a book I've been wanting to read for quite some time. This is a classic. This is A Lark Rise to Candleford by Flora Thompson. I believe that Lark Rise to Candleford is 3 books in one compilation. Yeah, there's A Lark Rise, there's Over to Candleford, and then there's Candleford Green. So this spans all 3 of the books in the trilogy that Flora Thompson wrote. I plan on reading at least Lark Rise, but I really hope that I'm going to love it and that it'll be great writing and that I'll be super engaged and I'll read the whole thing. It's not that long, about 540 pages. So it's not that long. And if the writing is engaging, I will read the whole thing. But if it's a little bit slow, I'm hoping to at least read the first book in that. Almost didn't tell you what it was about. So this is the story of 3 closely related Oxfordshire communities, a hamlet, the nearby village, and a small market town. This immortal trilogy is based on Flora Thompson's experiences during childhood and youth. It chronicles May Day celebrations and forgotten children's games, the daily lives of farm workers and craftsmen, friends and relations, all painted with the gaiety and freshness of observation that makes this a precise and endearing portrayal of country life at the end of the last century. I have a light one. A light read. This is Lucy Checks In. This is one where I've been reading so many stories about people who move overseas recently and just really loving them. So this is one of those. So this is Lucy Giannetti Needs a Fresh Start. Once the manager of a glamorous New York City hotel and intimately involved with the hotel's owner, Lucy had her entire future planned out. But when the owner disappears, taking millions of dollars with him, Lucy's life as she knows it falls apart. 2 years later, unemployed and just shy of 50, Lucy takes a job in Rennes, France, to manage the Hotel Paradise. She pictures fur quilts and extravagant chandeliers, but what she finds is wildly different. Lucy is now in charge of turning the run-down but charming hotel into a bustling tourist attraction. Between painting rooms, furnishing the renovated interior, and getting to know Bing, an irritatingly attractive artist, Lucy finds an unexpected home. But can she succeed in bringing the hotel to its former glory? Witty and heartfelt, Lucy Checks In is an inspiring and feel-good novel about reclaiming your life, finding love, and creating a home in places you never imagined. It's the kind of thing I've been enjoying reading lately, so I'm very, very happy to have it on my April TBR. I have a classic that I grabbed. This is by Marjorie Sharp, and it's called Britannia Muse, and it is like a first edition from 1946. My edition here is from 1946. I've never read anything by Marjorie Sharp, but I wanted to read something by Marjorie Sharp, and I ordered, did I order this one? I have 2. Did I order this one, or is this the one I got from the Little Free Library? I can't remember, but either way, it came to me old, original, without a dust jacket, and I'm into it. I love reading. I love these kinds of like pages with the little deckled edges, and they're so old, and they say somebody's name and address from 1946 in them. L.A. Trist, 151 Diana Street, Fresno, California. I know nothing about this. It dives straight into the story. It's broken into parts. Because I know nothing about it, I think I'll read you the first chapter on the first page. So it says, Chapter 1. Britannia Mews was built in 1865 to accommodate the carriage horses, coachmen, and other respectable dependents of the tin houses in Albion Place. The place, facing directly upon Hyde Park, and forming, in fact, a section of the Bayswater Road, was bounded by the north and south perpendiculars of Chester Street and Bedford Street. Its back doors opened on Albion Alley, which also debouched on these streets, and Britannia Mews opened off the opposite side of the alley through a wide and rather handsome arc. The Mews, too, ran north and south, squeezed up in the shape of a gin bottle between the backs of Chester and Bedford Street houses. Carriages passed in or out by the archway only, and to reach their appropriate front doors in Albion Place went round, in the current phrase, by either Chester or Bedford. This gave rise to a topographical joke, very popular among young fry of the place. "James is late again, what can be amiss? You know he has to come round by Chester, mamma." Many families thought it good enough for punch. I don't get it. But I do know they're setting the scene. I don't get the joke. If you get it, can you explain it to me? Let me read it one more time. This gave rise. Okay, wait. What gave rise? Carriages passed in or out by the archway only, and to reach their appropriate front doors in Albion Place went round, in the current phrase, by either Chester or Bedford. This gave rise to a topographical joke very popular among the young fry of the place. "James is late again. What can be amiss? You know he has to come round by Chester, mamma." Many families thought it was good enough for punch. I don't get it. If you get it, please explain it to me. I'm going to read Britannia Mews. I also have the Audible, it's free Audible edition on, I have the audio, it's free on Audible. There we go. I am going to read, so I got 4 book of the months in March, and I only read 3 of them, and that is a-okay. I will have another book of the month, whatever what from the choices that they offer for April, but those aren't out yet. But I do have this March holdover that I ordered, and that is Simone St. James's new one, Murder Road. I am really excited about this one. I love Simone St. James. This one is about April and Eddie. They're driving down a road. They pick up a hitchhiker. The hitchhiker dies. The police are like, people have been dying on this road forever, like for years. And we finally have 2 people who can tell us what they saw. We have witnesses for the first time in years. We're keeping you here. You're telling us everything. As they start to kind of dig into the history of the town and the road and the I guess it's a highway maybe, they start to realize that it's probably something supernatural and that they're all in grave danger in true Simone St. James fashion. So very excited to read that one. I'm gonna do it. Demon Copperhead, Barbara Kingsolver. I love Barbara Kingsolver's writing most of the time. When I don't love it, I really don't love it. I love David Copperfield. Love David Copperfield. Will I love Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver? I don't know. I'm not going to say anything about this. I think most people who might be watching me have probably heard of it. I have a 12 and 12 book recommendation from a friend. This is a nice short one. It is a sequel. I've already read the first one. I am going to be reading at the request of my friend Erin, or at the suggestion of my friend Erin. I'm going to read A Prayer for the Crown Shy. I'm not going to say anything about this. It is by Becky Chambers. It is the sequel to whatever it's the sequel to. The green book with the robot and the monk. Oh, what's it called? Oh, it's called the Monk and Robot series. Love that. A Psalm for the Wild-Built. It is the sequel to A Psalm for the Wild-Built. I did read A Psalm for the Wild-Built. I did appreciate it. I did not love it. I know, sacrilege among the bookish community, but it's the truth. I loved the beginning. I loved the first time the monk sets up his tea shop and doesn't really know what he's doing at all. I loved those things. And then about halfway through, even though it's a very short book, I was like, I'm done. It's a book that could have been a short story, maybe? I don't know. maybe I just wasn't in the right mood for it. I do love Becky Chambers, and I do love what she's doing with these books. So maybe A Prayer for the Crown Shy will hit me better. We shall see. I am going to read, this is a book I had pre-ordered already. And then I saw that it was on Jennifer Brooks's list of 24 books that she would have liked to read in 2024. For those who may be removed from it now, she passed away earlier this year unexpectedly. She was an influential booktuber in my reading life, and I decided that I wanted to give a try to the 24 books that she anticipated reading but did not get to read. That's been hit or miss. I've DNF'd most of them. So far, I've DNF'd most of them, but that's okay. It's not about me having to love what she picked. It's about me honoring those intentions on her behalf. And so I had already actually pre-ordered this, and then I saw it on her list, and I was like, well, that's nice. So I have two Jennifer Brooks 24 and 24 books to read. The first is a pre-ordered that is coming. It's not here yet. That is Leigh Bardugo's The Familiar. This, I believe, is a historical fiction, which I'm excited about. It is, I think, about a girl who works in a kitchen in Spain or Italy, maybe Rome. Sorry. And I'm thinking like Medici period, like I think it's that kind of time. She works in the kitchen and she has some kind of magical talent, skill. She can do something. And she thinks it's small, or she wants people to think it's small, but then somebody notices that she can do it. And then kingdoms start like entrapping her to do it for them, to win wars and things like that. I think that's what this is about. I'm just kind of in it for the ride. I'm going into it a little bit blind. The second Jennifer Brooks book I'm going to listen to on audio. This one sounds weird and not exactly my kind of thing, but that's okay. It is Chlorine by Jade Song. And I am just going to look up what this is about. I think it's about a swimmer, a competitive swimmer that's turning into a mermaid. And maybe this is my thing now, because I just in March read Shark Heart, and it is one of my favorite reads of the year. It might be, it's early in the year to tell, but it is in the running for favorite read of the year. So maybe I'll like Chlorine a lot as well. But let's see what it is about. In the vein of The Pisces and The Vegetarian, Chlorine is a debut novel that blurs the line between a literary coming-of-age narrative and a dark, unsettling horror tale told from an adult perspective on the trials and tribulations of growing up in a society that puts pressure on young women and their bodies. A powerful, relevant novel of immigration, longing, and fierce, defiant becoming. I don't really like adult coming of age novels, but we shall see. We shall see. I'm not going to decide before I read it that I don't like it. I'm going to give it a try and we'll see what happens. I have another classic. This one has been on my shelf for quite a long time and I've never picked it up, and I don't know why. So I'm going to pick up Gustave Flaubert's Sentimental Education. Never read this. I don't even think I knew what it was about when I bought it, but since then I've read a little bit about it and I'm even more interested in reading it. So it says, set amid the violent social upheaval of the Revolution of 1848, the novel tells of young Frédéric Moreau's idealistic attraction to a married woman some years his senior. Smitten by his first sight of Madame Arnaud, Frédéric idolizes her for many years, despite her refusal to encourage him and his own indecision. He befriends her husband, an art dealer, in order to be near her, and soon finds himself drawn first into Jacques' heady social circle and then into his disastrous financial speculations. So this, although very different, reminds me a lot of The Red and the Black by Stendhal, which I read a few years back and really loved, really loved. Now, Flaubert Madame Bovary, don't love. Really don't love. So this may prove to be a DNF. It may prove to be an unhaul. And that's kind of why I want to pick it up now, because I am curious about the story and what he's going to do with it. But at the same time, I don't have enough data to know whether or not I truly get along or don't get along with this author's writing. I don't like his most famous book, and that is possibly telling. So we'll see. I am going to give this a try though. And worst case scenario, I don't like it. I stop reading it. I make more room on my shelf. I am going to pick up a book I didn't get to in March. I'm going to read Alexandra Rafe's Belonging. I've talked about this a lot already in both my wrap-up of Wild Highland Home and in my TBR for March. I've talked about this already, so all I will say is this is the second in a companion trilogy. Each novel stands alone, but they have in common that they are about a woman in the 1990s. They're written in the 1990s, so it's contemporary. So a woman in the 1990s who leaves some sort of city life for some kind of Highland Scottish country life, and how that improves her life and herself as a person. I am finally going to pick up the second book in this series, the Neapolitan series. I read My Brilliant Friend. Is that what it's called? I may be the only person on earth who forgets. Yes. I read My Brilliant Friend 4 years ago, and really surprised myself with how much I enjoyed it. That is one slow, plodding, wildly entertaining, disturbing, saddening, disheartening, uplifting book. It is a little bit like reality television, I guess. I think that's a good comparison. It's a lot of drama, and it's a lot of girls infighting and growing up, and a lot of society being icky. And I think it's in the 1950s. It's current day because these two girls have grown up together, and it starts because one of them has gone missing, and then the other one starts reminiscing about the past. And so the reminiscences take place in the 1950s. And at the end of the first one, there's a wedding, and I don't know where the second one picks up. I'm not going to look into that at all. I'm just going to dive into it and start reading. It's one of those books that I don't know why I haven't picked up, because like I said, I really did enjoy. I did need a break. It is intense, but I didn't need a 4-year break. So diving back into that. I already started this because it was in my bag on a day when I forgot to bring my actual silent reading book to school on silent reading day. So I started this, but then I put it away because I had so many other things to read. But I've only read 14 pages, and I already have 5 tabs of things that I felt were so interesting. So this is The Middle Window by Elizabeth Googe, and this will be the first book that I read in April. I know it will, because I've been wanting to continue reading it ever since March. I had so many books I needed to read in March, though, that I didn't let myself derail with a book I knew I could read in April. So this is, from what I can tell, about a woman, I think in the 30s or the 40s, maybe the 50s, somewhere in the past. I think she's in England. I don't know if she's in London. She's in a city. And she's just kind of feeling melancholy and lost and disconnected from herself and her life. She's engaged. She's wealthy. She's aware of her privilege, and she's bored by it. And she knows she doesn't really deserve to be bored because she has nothing to worry about. She should be footloose and fancy free and involved in things and happy and living life and giving of herself to her community. She knows all these things, but she doesn't feel them. And then she looks at this painting, and it kind of comes to life in front of her. And it is this life-changing moment. And she's like, I've got to go to this location, which happens to be in the Scottish Highlands. That is all I know so far, because that is just the tip of the iceberg of what happened in those first 14 pages. I'll just read you a couple of little snips. She found herself looking through 3 different windows at 3 different worlds. This is what happens when she sees this picture. She found herself looking through 3 different windows at 3 different worlds, and she knew what the worlds were, and she knew too that within the next 2 minutes she would have to decide which one was to be her home. On the right was the world of brilliance and wealth, into which she had been born and for which she had thought herself destined. And on the left was the world of compromise, that united pleasure with a love of nature and of homely things, and achieved a placid comfort. And in the middle, what was she looking at through the middle window? A world of stark and terrible beauty, of sorrow and failure, shorn of wealth and comfort, but yet ablaze with joy, the world of the heights of the human spirit. It seemed to Judy that her little shivering self was flitting from side to side, unwilling to choose either of the worlds to left or right, yet cowering back in fear from the terrible middle window. And yet she had to choose it. It was where she belonged. The courage and strength that were the presence of her drove her on. She took a step forward on the pavement and fixed her eyes on that purple mountain against the stormy sky, and as she moved forward, her spirit moved too, and was caught and held. She felt the grip as of fire that seized her, and the whole world reeled. I'm into it. It reminds me a little bit, at this point, it reminds me a little bit of Thorny Hold by Mary Stewart. Very different stories, but I love the way that it's just this like 1950s kind of boring, typical moment that without explanation turns into something so much greater. It's the without explanation. It's the assumption that you'll just go along, and you know what I do? I just go along, and I love it. I love it. I have one more physical book, and then I have several pre-orders or audiobooks that I want to share. So I loved, in March, I read Emily of New Moon. It was a reread for me, but I loved my reread so much that I am going to pick up in April the second book, Emily Climbs, and you know what that means. That means that in May, you're going to see Emily's Quest. So just prepare to hear a lot about Emily over the next couple of months. Absolutely love this series. If you haven't read it, this is by the author of Anne of Green Gables. Emily is a darker, more realistic, more rough, more earthy character than Anne of Green Gables. Emily is also an orphan. She is raised by 2 spinster aunts and a uncle or a cousin. He's the cousin of the aunts, so I guess he's her second cousin, but he's like an uncle figure. And he's like a young boy, kind of, and he has these strange moments where he looks off into space and recites a poem, and Emily has these strange moments where she can see things that other people can't see, the second sight. There's a mother figure who is not Emily's mother figure, but a mother figure of a friend who is very disturbingly devoted to her child, to the point where she kills things he loves. This is a different L.M. Montgomery, but at the same time, very familiar, very wonderful. This series is a lot about love. So there are 3 men, 2 boys and a man, who love Emily and want her to love them back. Who will she pick? That's what this is about, as well as what will her road to becoming an author be like, because we know she's going to become an author. Now, let's talk about some more pre-orders. I did the Familiars pre-order, but I also pre-ordered a book called Clear by Karis Davies. This takes place on a remote island with 1 inhabitant, and it is about a priest who is called upon to clear that island of all inhabitants. So he has to go out there and get this one person who's lived their whole life there to leave the island. It's a very short book. I think it's going to be very beautiful and intense and literary, and I am there for it. And I believe it's an island off the Scottish coast. I pre-ordered One of Us Knows by Alyssa Cole. I really enjoy Alyssa Cole's writing. I particularly enjoyed her foray, is that what it is? Her waltz into the thriller genre. I don't know if that was truly a thriller. I'm speaking of when no one is watching. The one about the apartment complexes and the things that are really going on. Gentrification, her horror novel about gentrification. I don't know if it truly is a thriller, but it was fascinating. It was a fascinating take and a fascinating way to tell a story, and the characters were really engaging, and I really, really loved my time with her as a thriller writer. I've also read her Civil War romance trilogy. I've read 3 of the books. If there are more, I've only read 3. And I really loved that. I think the first one's called A Great Divide, which was the first book by her that I ever read. I really enjoyed that series. So I think I really like her as a writer. So I went ahead and got excited and pre-ordered her new thriller, which is called One of Us Knows. I don't know a whole lot about it. I know that it takes place in an old house. So it's one of these stories where people arrive at a house, it's a little bit isolated, and there are secrets, and they're gonna uncover them. I think that there is a setup. I think there's a murder, and somebody is set up as the murderer, but didn't do it. So I think it's maybe a locked room thriller mystery that I'm excited to read, because I really do enjoy Alyssa Cole's writing. I also pre-ordered Robin Leffler's new one. This is Not How I Pictured It. This one also takes place on an island. There is an island theme. I think this is about a group of people who are maybe in a movie together, and they get marooned on an island, and then it gets a little Lord of the Flies. But here's why I ordered it. Because Robin Leffler's Reasonable Adults was almost my favorite read of last year. It's light and silly and ridiculous and funny, and I loved every stinking second I had of reading it. That one is about a woman who goes to be the marketing manager of a remote creative retreat, kind of like art camp, but for adults, for very rich adults. When she gets there, she's like, this is like a cult. I'm totally isolated. My boss is nuts. All of these things feel true. And it's just her finding herself, falling in love, saving a company. It was ridiculous and perfect. And so when I saw that Robin Leffler had a second book coming out, because that was, the other one was her debut. So when I saw she had a second one coming out, you better believe I pre-ordered that baby right there on the spot. I believe I was in my classroom. And I just was like, I don't care, pre-ordering. And I haven't done very many pre-orders at all in a very long time. So April is kind of a one-off moment for me. I've got maybe 10 books pre-ordered for the entire year. Don't plan on doing any more. And this month has most of them. So, Not How I Pictured It. Again, I know that it takes place on an island and people are deserted there and it gets a little Lord of the Flies, but other than that, I don't know. I am really excited to see what Robin will do with this story. I have one more book to talk about, and this one is another rollover from my March TBR that I didn't get to. This is one of the middle grades that I really wanted to get to, but my library hold never came in. So I'm still waiting on my library hold, and if it comes in April, I will be listening to The Scandalous Sisterhood of Prick Willow Place. This is by Julia Barry, and this is the book that my friend Darla said, you have to listen to this one, you're gonna love it, you can read it, but really the listen is the thing. And so I've just been waiting, and the listen must be the thing, because I have access to 2 very large libraries that move very quickly through things. Like most of my holds, unless it's crazy wild, like the most popular book ever, unless it's like an Anne Patchett or something. Most of my holds, even if they're very, very new, come in within a couple of weeks. And this is not a new book. It is a middle grade book. There are multiple copies, all of them in use for the entire time that they are loaned out. So I have been waiting for close to 4 weeks, and that's kind of unheard of for my libraries, which says to me it must be a wonderful book because everybody wants to keep it to the last little bit of their time with it. And a lot of people have it checked out, and it is really not a new book. I think it may be from 2015, 2016, it's older. So I am looking forward to reading it when I finally get my hands on it, but it just didn't come in yet. And that is my April TBR. It's a little hodgepodge. It's a little bit of all sorts. Lots of classics, lots of stories set on islands. That was completely unplanned. But I'm really interested in this whole kind of menagerie of characters and stories. I've been doing such interesting and varied reading in 2024. It feels very different from last year, which was a really indulgent year for me, where I just read only things that made me happy. Pretty much. And so I am really, really thriving on and soaking up these books that I'm reading that are deeper, and also balancing them with, Lucy checks in. But sometimes these kinds of books, they look like they don't pack a punch, but they do. But they do sometimes. And I love it when that happens. It's why I keep coming back to them. They let me down again and again. But when they work, they work. So I keep looking. I keep coming back. I keep trying. Have you read any of these? Do you read a lot of books set on islands? Do you enjoy a good classic? Let me know down in the comments. And if you think that one of these books is the book I should start with, let me know, because right now I'm pretty sure it's going to be this one. Now, it's sunny outside. It's going to hit 70 degrees today. And that little beast right there, who's waiting for her time in the sun, is about to get her time in the sun. So we're gonna go. I'll see you later. For now, let's go read.